Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Before we begin the proceedings of our committee meeting, I need to highlight safety protocols and expectations. Based on the latest data, science, and guidance from the Kent County Health Department, we have extended the GRPS pre-K through 12 mask mandate for all students, staff, and visitors until the end of the school year, regardless of vaccination status. If you are in need of a mask, these are available at the entrances. Public comment cards and meeting agendas are located on the tables within the board chambers at both entrances. Once you fill out a comment card, please submit this in the drop box next to the comment cards. Our board assistant will collect the cards when I call for public comment. I will call on each individual one at a time to address the committee at the presentation table. And on behalf of the Academic Achievement Committee and administration, thank you for being here in attendance with us. So at this time, I will call our meeting to order. And I don't believe we have public comment, so we can move right on into our update.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Davis, Mrs. Williams, Ms. Grant. Happy New Year. Welcome to the first Academic Achievement Committee meeting for the year. Let me walk you through the agenda very quickly. We're going to start with an Instructional Council update. Jane Neiman is here, educator at Union High School. Mr. Lewis is going to then present on the progress of the Ottawa Hills High School Academies. That was a request, so we'll give you an update regarding where we are at the current time. After that, I am going to share with you some state assessment data. I haven't been able to do that in quite some time. Our students, many students, or some students rather, took our state assessment last year. The year before, we did not take a state assessment as a result of the early stages of the pandemic. And then, of course, in 2018, 2019, we did take our state assessment. And then lastly, I am going to present on our Intersession, which was 2 weeks of programming over the holiday break. That's the first time we've ever done anything like this that I can remember in our school district, where we had 6 days of instruction during the holiday break. Eric is not here, so I will present on that portion. And then Amy Powney, our math curriculum coordinator, is going to walk us through iExcel. It is a Tier 2 intervention which supported our students through intersession work. So without any further ado, Ms. Jane Neiman.
Hi, good afternoon. On December 16th, the Instructional Council met, and we heard from 2 different schools. Museum School reported out on their senior capstone project. Seniors at Museum School have to do a project. It's a year-long capstone project that is supervised by multiple teachers. They are advisors. And this is a culmination of the different disciplines and experiences and learning that has happened over the course of their years at Museum High School. There was a wide variety of projects presented to us at Instructional Council, all very interesting. And the procedure so far this year is going great. They have actually brought in their freshman students. So they're tying in the freshmen to the senior capstone and giving them a little exposure as to what they're going to be seeing in 3 years. So it's very exciting, great presentation. Students do have to leave an artifact with the school, and they are going to present and display those artifacts in late April and early May at Museum High School. Was very interesting, and it sounded like a lot of fun. Everybody was very excited, teachers and students. We also heard from Eric Buttrin, a science teacher at Union. He was approached by an assistant principal to request a grant, which is funded by Amazon Corporation, to teach Python programming language. And he came to the Instructional Council to present a computer science course. Currently, we have an AP computer science class in the course catalog, but this would not be AP. This would be a science elective that would be offered to anyone 9th through 12th. which involves the basics of Python, which is a programming language like C and C++, can be used for robotics programs as well. And Eric is currently going through the 40 hours of professional development in order to teach this class, and requested to have a pilot approved for the fall. There is no endorsement required for computer science any longer. That was discontinued. So with the appropriate professional development, any teacher can teach this. It would be a science elective. And of course, is very relevant for programming and any students that have any interest in continuing into the computer science field.
So it doesn't have to be a science teacher that gets that endorsement? But he happens
That's a
to
good
be
question. I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think anybody that has the programming,
Okay.
the professional development for it, can currently teach the course. So you have to prove that you've had the certification or had the curriculum, studied the curriculum, and that you have had the training in it. And obviously you have to know the programming language.
Yeah,
So Eric is currently doing that work.
nice.
One question as well. Are some schools also using those computer science type courses as a math, as a math class as well? If I remember correctly, I think maybe it was Museum, but they were having not maybe a coding class, I think it was, but it was also used as math. I just wanted to know if I had that correct or.
So at the high school level, of course, there is, at the high school level, there's the Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and then fourth year mathematics requirement. I know that we have entertained the idea of embedding many of our mathematical standards into other courses. Amy, do you want to expound on, please, Amy's over math, so you can hear it directly from her, but we still have that 4-year math sequence, Algebra, Geometry, Algebra 2, and a fourth year mathematics course. But I believe Ms. Grant's question is embedded into other courses. So Amy, please address.
Yeah, and so it really, the language of the state, the MMEC requirements, just say that a fourth year math-related course, and so it is left to the district's discretion on which courses they can use to tie into that if they so choose to find math standards that are embedded within there and it makes sense to do it. So it's certainly a possibility.
But we're not currently doing that.
That kind of goes on an individual building
Okay.
basis. And so where they need and where they find a need for a class, and obviously students need that fourth year credit. So there are different courses, obviously accounting, but you can take a physics course and have it count as a fourth year math related course, or a chemistry course, or, you know, it's like I said, the language of the standards is up to the discretion of the district. And obviously you're not going to get any pushback from the state unless you've picked something that there's no way relates to it in any way at all. We just need to be able to support the fact that there's a connection there, but yeah.
So
So it
I'm
could be.
sorry, Jane, because this is kind of bridging off of that, but, so if they take like a physics course, could it count as math for one student but science for another student?
They actually even changed language that you can actually kind of double dip in that category where it could be a science credit that they needed as well. But because the language states that students have to take it in their fourth year, like they have to have a senior fourth year, so it's not going to count if I took physics as a junior and then I need that fourth year math credit. I'd still need to take a math related course
Gotcha.
that fourth year. So.
That makes sense.
Thank you. Sorry.
No.
It was a bit of a bridge.
It's a good question. In the case of this pilot in this course, it is primarily going to be taught as a computer science class.
Okay.
And would count as a science elective, which students need that third year if they didn't want to take physics but are interested in getting into, networking and programming. This is kind of a step into that. And Python is a pretty an easier programming language to learn. I have a brother-in-law in the field, and he also runs a robotics program out at Hudsonville High School. So this would be a great segue into reintroducing a robotics program, and also just would be that leap, maybe if as a freshman or sophomore students took this class, they could perhaps segue into the IT program at KCTC, or then continue on to maybe take a AP computer science course.
Awesome. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, Jean.
Yep, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Davis, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Grant. I'm here to present on the Ottawa Hills High School Academies. So I'll start it off by showing you a slide that has various pictures of Randolph Career and Technical Center visit we had, I believe it was on December 9th. Where we took Ottawa Hills administrative team, along with Dr. Gorman and myself, to conduct a visit based on, I believe Dr. Roby had visited the Career Center as well, and she wanted us to go over and take a look and see what they were doing there. They had a construction program that they were utilizing within their Career Center. So they had one program specifically where they had HVAC, plumbing, masonry, and electrical work being done within the facility itself. So we had a good chance to take a nice visit. We had an opportunity to have a conversation with the Ottawa team to talk through what our next steps will be as we move forward with our academies there at Ottawa Hills. So just talked about the visit. There was a survey conducted by the Ottawa Hills administrative team with the current students that are in the school or enrolled in the school. Some of the things that came out of there were there was a high interest in culinary, there was a high interest in media production, and then I think the third area was health sciences. And so we had an opportunity to have some conversations about the survey. One of the things that we're going to continue to do, be ongoing, is the recruitment, but as well as the retention piece. We have to ensure that we retain all the students that we have in the programs, and then we build on that moving forward. I will say that there, some of the challenges that the Career Center or in Detroit had also during this pandemic time was securing additional individuals to enroll in their programming. So they had a challenge there. And so we, over the last year, have experienced, or year and a half, experienced some of the same challenges in trying to recruit kids to these programs because of the pandemic. But I think we'll be in a good place moving forward. But we're also we did a soft launch with media production this year, and I think we had 11 students enrolled in the program. They were able to get two classes out of the school year. First semester they had introduction to great customer service. Second semester right now they're taking a digital media class where they are working also alongside of Junior Achievement and MLive to build out a business component within media production where they're selling ads and actually running a business. They're going to utilize MLive to support that process over a 4-year period. So they'll cycle through grades 9 through 12 in that program. I did share with you guys that there was a high interest in culinary arts, and so we are going to include culinary arts this fall. We're going to work with GRCC, partners with GRCC. We're going to start setting up meetings with Dave Selman and his team from GRCC to start talking about some entry-level courses that we can offer. And that program will be housed as a supporting arm of the hospitality and tourism program that we currently have at Ottawa Hills High School. And then we'll continue to build upon the media production. We are going to, actually at this time, we're looking at bringing on a consultant to support us in that process of building out the media production program. That person has done this work before out of state, and so we're going to utilize his expertise to help us build out the program, do some recruiting, and get a hard launch with the program in the fall of 2022. And then we have to determine what the next steps are. Now, one of the things that we want to ensure that takes place is that we are able to retain the students, recruit the students, retain the students, and build on the academies that we currently have before we move forward with any future academies. So with that, that's my presentation. If you have any questions or concerns, please share.
So I know there were some very specific academies that were originally being looked at. Are we at a point where it's kind of back open and I see that we're like surveying students and things like that. So are we kind of going back to the drawing board a little bit and opening it up to different possibilities?
So I don't think we're going back to the drawing board. What I believe we are looking at is what meets the interests of kids, and did we already kind of develop that out from our white paper that we created a few years ago? If there's some other things that come up within some of the big buckets, we'll look at how we can change, modify, or add to some of the academies that we currently have.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Grant, as you'll notice, two of the academies that were in that initial plan are now, of course, up and running. The building now has a new principal, even though the new principal was really kind of getting up and running during the pandemic, so that created a few challenges. But we wanted to make sure that she and her team, as well as the students who are attending school there, had a voice, and their voices were heard loud and clear, especially around the culinary component. And we thought that would tie nicely with the hospitality and tourism piece. The media productions piece also is going to include a music component, and that's something that the students are very excited about. So media production, music production. As you'll see in the last bullet, determining next steps for the academies. We had some ideas a couple of years ago, and now are these the ideas that we still want to come to fruition? But so we will continue to update you, but we feel it's important that we do these two very well before taking on something else, because to Mr. Lewis's point, recruitment is a major challenge. But what I think is exciting is the culinary component is something the students are really excited about in the building. And then secondly, with the consultant that we're hopefully working through bringing on staff, the program at which he currently works out of state is absolutely wonderful and creates a tremendous product every year. Students are excited about it. Students see themselves in the projects that are created in the school. So we're hoping we'll get some excitement here and then determine next steps.
Awesome. And then I know the last time we had like a full work session around the Ottawa academies, we were talking about kind of creating a profile for each academy. So when a student matriculates through this program, these are different degrees that they may pursue in school, different careers that they can work immediately after high school or some after their degrees. What are those salaries that match with that? And who are employers in the Grand Rapids area who would employ them in those fields? So is that something that we're still looking to do, build that profile out?
Yeah, I think especially for these two programs with the support that we're getting from higher ed. I mean, the School of Hospitality and Tourism, that's a Grand Valley State University partnership, so they should be able to help with that piece. I think the media production piece, we're going to have to create that profile. I know we did some preliminary work, but revisit that so we can say, hey, students, if you pursue this particular career, this is where you will go to a 4-year school or a 2-year school, or this is how you'll enter the profession, this is the salary range, etc. So students go in with their eyes wide open. So we will work on that for these two, but I think it's revisiting what we put together a few years ago, which seems like 10 years ago.
And we do have the profiles built out as it relates to the various jobs as well as the salaries. So
Okay.
that does
Just need to revisit it.
Okay, awesome. And I know a million things have happened, so not an issue at all. But I know the board was really excited about seeing those, and I don't know if we've been able to. Just a lot has been going on, so once those profiles are ready, we would love to see those.
Why don't we bring the two back that are related to these programs in a subsequent meeting, if you all are comfortable with that? And then you'll determine from this point if we want to bring that to full board. But as Mr. Lewis referenced kind of this hard launch with the media production school, we're going to be revisiting this next year because we want two programs over there that are absolutely doing wonderfully for students. So
Awesome.
Mr. Lewis will work on that.
My question is with regards to the culinary arts or the hospitality, whatever. With regards to the programs, are there certification levels that the students will be able to achieve with attending that will also help make them more marketable if they decide per se not to go a collegiate route, but to try to enter the field? So have we fleshed that out a little bit in both of those schools or the academies? I'm sorry, in both of those academies?
So why don't I start with what we saw in Detroit, and then Mr. Lewis will talk about in-house here in Grand Rapids, the CTE work we've done.
Okay.
In Detroit, most of the programs were one-year programs or two-year programs. And in some instances, students had the opportunity, because there was some flexibility, to go on a one-year program and then shift over to another school and receive a credential there as well. Mr. Lewis will talk about CTE requirements and what our plans are for these two particular schools.
So from CTE perspective, we're going to have to submit an application to the Michigan Department of Education to get approvals for these two programs, to do some of the work that Mrs. Grant talked about as it relates to articulating various credits out of the programs to show up in different areas within their transcript. The kids will be able to get certifications in the process. We've already have some of that work established for the Academy of Hospitality and Tourism. And so we'll have to build upon that for the culinary piece. As we work alongside of GRCC, we'll start building out that process as well.
And you had said 11 students were in the soft launch of the media production. How many students are in the hospitality academy right now? Do you know?
So I don't have that answer right now. I think I brought it to the last meeting we had, but I don't have that number now. I know it's above 20 for the various levels.
As soon as we're able to have more conversations with Grand Rapids Community College around the culinary arts piece, I know I'm connecting with the provost, Mr. Lewis, and I will be connecting with their team as well. We'll have even more information. And because there's such a nice connection with higher education, I know some of those things we've fleshed out, Mrs. Williams.
And so, can you just share with me what is the long-term perspective for the academies? So is it to have Ottawa fully and completely all students in one of these components as and it ultimately grows to capacity? So if we can, put another 1,000 students in Ottawa that are in these academies, can you share with me what the long-term outlook is for these academies?
Yeah, the strategy was to have these academies so that we could really ensure that students have skills to be successful, first and foremost, but then secondly, to increase our enrollment. And if these programs start to do well, we may be able to pull in lots of students to the programs. I think the plan is for students to gravitate to an academy. There still will be a middle college program at Ottawa Hills as well, which is a partnership that we have with Grand Rapids Community College, a 5-year program. So, I guess time will tell if there's still a comprehensive school component. If you think about Innovation Central right now, which is comparable thinking, there is no student who is assigned to the comprehensive school. Every student is assigned to an academy at Innovation Central. Everyone's assigned to something. So only time will tell. Now with the numbers that we're talking about right now, you still have a large group of students who aren't assigned to academies. So that will be our work the next couple of years. Is there enough excitement about the academies to say, gosh, if you're at Ottawa, you're picking one of these four, or you're picking the college program, the middle college program, so really 105. Mr. Lewis, anything to add?
I support that wholeheartedly. I think when Innovation Center was comprised as a school, it was built that way. That was a part of the written description that kids would automatically select the academy of their choice. There would not be a comprehensive model. As we look at Ottawa Hills High School, the way we built it out is that as the students matriculated up into the various academies, but also grade levels, it would automatically somewhat turn into a academy model all the way across, maybe having a small number of students that are participating in a comprehensive model.
Any other questions?
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So next up, I would like to share with you some state assessment data, and I'd like to provide a little bit of context first before providing you with these data. Grand Rapids Public Schools last year was one of the only schools in the region that tested a pretty large percentage of our students. And even when I share that, when I say large percentage compared to some of the school districts in the region, where there were districts in the region very close to Grand Rapids that sent parents letters to opt into testing. And so there are many suburban districts around the region where they only had a handful of students take the M-STEP assessment. Our stance was, if you were attending school in person, that you would take the assessment. If you were attending school virtually, and a parent wanted a student to take the assessment, then they would make arrangements with the school principal, come in under very safe conditions, take the assessment, and then of course continue to work virtually from home. So I want you to notice a couple of things. First of all, notice the drop in participation rates from our normal year, and I believe we would do a really good job when we're 100% in person to get close to 100% of our students taking our state assessments. There was a time in this school district where we didn't have 100% or close to 100% of our students taking state assessments. Over the last, I would say, probably close to 10 years, we've had really close to 100% of our students take the assessments. Okay, so that's the first thing I want you to notice. Secondly, there are significant dips as it relates to proficiency across the board. Are there a few examples where some schools ticked up? Yes, but only a handful. If you look at the state of Michigan, for last year, we averaged less than 75% of students taking this assessment statewide. And in some instances, for some subject areas, that number was less than 50%. Again, some of our neighboring districts were less than 3%, less than 5%. Okay, so again, notice the participation differences. In most instances, when we look at the test data, we had dips or we were stagnant with a few bumps. Okay, and then after I share the testing data with you, I want to share with you what we are currently doing to address the challenges that we're having from a proficiency standpoint. Because we've had students who have missed a lot of school, especially a lot of in-person school, as a result of the pandemic. So I've created for you a PowerPoint deck here where it's just straight alpha by school. The first thing you'll notice is Aberdeen participation. So 2018, 2019, just as I referenced before, 99% of the students in that particular building pre-pandemic took the assessment. In 2019-20, we did not take the assessment. That's why those data are not included. And then 2021 is when we had essentially partial participation. Now 60%, during a pandemic when many students are participating virtually, is higher than some others, but is still significantly lower than almost 100%. As you go through the list, and I don't need to read these off to you, but you'll notice that all schools here were lower in participation dipped or stayed the same, and then there was one program that is a very small program that has 60 students. That was the only program, Blandford, that ticked up, and you can see that their participation rates were comparable to pre-pandemic. As I go to the next slide, again by Alpha, you'll notice that participation rates, again, starting with Burton, 47% compared to that 100%. And if you look at participation, again, from pre-pandemic, 99% or higher. Post-pandemic, I think the highest on here is, you've got a 70.22. You actually have a Center for Economic Ecology, which is 77.78. But again, you'll notice that scores are significantly lower across the board. Moving on to Cesar Chavez through East Leonard. Actually pretty high, higher participation rates there, moving into the 70%, City at 80%. I don't believe there's anything higher than that on the slide. City in ELA, Congress in ELA and math proficiency, and East Leonard in ELA proficiency. All of those schools ticked up slightly. Keeping in mind, though, this is not something we say, wow, they're making progress, when only 47% of the students, 58% of the students, and 81% of the students took the test. So you can't have it both ways, say, oh, wow, look at these gains, when we're saying, well, we've regressed in many areas as a result of so many students not testing and also learning loss. Now we go forward through museum. Again, you'll notice some very low participation rates in some schools. There were some schools that ticked up during this time, but even with the ones that ticked up, we're still looking at 57% participation rates, 56% participation rates, 64% participation rates. Ms. Davis.
Is there any correlation with the amount of students that were in person? Like if their percentage rate is,
Sure.
if a school has a high percentage rate, like City was 80 something.
I think you could infer, and I will have to verify this, but the schools that had the higher rates of participation had more students who were engaging in person.
That's what I'm just
That's an
wondering, or
inference.
was it a method of
No.
trying to get parents to
There
bring?
were very few parents who said, my student is participating virtually, and I would like to make an appointment to have my student take the
Right.
state test.
Yeah.
For the scholars who participated virtually, their number one priority was safety, and they didn't want to come back to school. Okay, so I think that your inferences, lower participation rates, a smaller amount of students who were participating in person, but we can verify those data just to be sure. Okay, UPrep to Kent Hills, again, low levels of participation, a couple of upticks, one of which Innovation Central, another Zoo, another Ken O'Shea, but again, if you look at Ken O'Shea here, 100% participation, and then the math proficiency went up slightly. Zoo School, pretty high participation, the results went up. Innovation Central, almost, getting close to 80% participation, slight tick up with ELA. I would like to say that the higher rates of participation, the higher rates of proficiency, but that's not the case for all schools. But these are a couple of examples where the participation rates were slightly higher than others, and there were some pockets of proficiency, higher proficiency. MLK to the Ottawa Transition program. Again, you can see, without my having to explain it, the participation rates. If you'll notice, some say NA, and that is because the participation numbers were too small, like usually less than 10 or less than 30. And when they're that low, students are easy to identify. So we try to keep, the state tries to keep as much anonymous data. Let me not try to say that right now while I'm while I'm in the middle of the presentation. You'll notice with Ottawa Transition, and you will also notice with Union Transition, students, these are CI students who take an alternate assessment, and more than likely a small group of numbers, maybe even one, took the assessment. So that could be one student who did very well on the assessment. Okay, next up, Palmer through Sherwood. Again, Palmer, pretty high participation rates there, 81. You'll notice that Ridgemore ticked up slightly, but again, only testing 66.67% of the students. Sherwood Park, slight tick up, but again, the participation rates are low. Here is Sibley through Union Transition. You'll notice I highlighted Union Transition, CI programs. We don't know how many students that is, alternate assessment, but there was a tick up from 78 to 100%. But again, we can't tell how many students that was based on these data. And then lastly, Westwood did a really good job in previous years testing close to 100% of students, tested about half of those students. There was a tick up with the half of the students that were assessed. I'm wishing that was 100% in 2020, 2021, because those would be, a nice gains in a school year for Westwood. But unfortunately, that was not the case. So what I'd like to underscore is, did Grand Rapids Public Schools have participation on M-STEP assessment that was higher than many schools in the region? Absolutely, we sure did. Our data, if we look at it, our data compared to state level data, they had scores that dipped from about 7% to 2% in subjects. We were pretty comparable to that, but we had some that took significant dips as a result of the pandemic, okay? And there were a few schools that, even though they had lower rates of participation, they ticked up, but we will have to, of course, check on that when we take the state assessment right after spring break to see if these are actual gains or just gains from a small group of students. What questions do you have around state data before I move on to what we need to do about this?
I'm wondering, now hindsight that we're through it and seeing how other districts handled, not necessarily really emphasizing as many students as possible taking this test, what benefits or in what ways may that have harmed us going forward?
Well, I think one way it could potentially harm us is the state's report card. If the state doesn't do something, let's say, for example, I'm a neighboring district and I tested 5 or 6 students, and those 5 or 6 students did very well.
5 or 6
and that school gets an A grade because those 5 or 6 students did very well. That's something that would harm us, where we put forth a good faith effort to test as many students as possible, and as a result, maybe got some lower grades. If, unfortunately, in many instances, the public looks at this and says, oh, your school is a good school or a bad school as a relate to proficiency rates or grades. Assessments tell us how well we're doing, right? Tell us how well our children are doing. We should be looking at assessment data, finding out the areas on which our students are struggling, and address those areas. That's what we should be doing. Unfortunately, we give state tests, we hand out grades, people make judgments, and then we move on until the next year that something is put out there. I mean, we believe in our district assessments, MAP, our MAP test as a parent in the school district. Those assessments give a tremendous amount of valuable data to us. I know where my students are compared to students nationally. I think that the classroom assessments, the assessments that are created by our curriculum department, those are the assessments that are very important because we can make real-time modifications when students are exhibiting challenges. Unfortunately, when we get these data, it's at the end of a school year. Students are getting passed on to another class, or moving on to another class rather, and so you're really looking at old data. That said, we need to do better, and we believe we will.
So is there no penalty for a district to not have a certain percentage of students take the test?
There has been in the past. But of course, These last couple of years, there's been some grace, some leniency, but I don't believe anybody was dinged because everyone was erring on the side of caution. When we look at the report card data and the grades of folks around the region, there are some examples that we shared in academic team where there's a handful of students who took it and their proficiency rates are significantly higher than ours. Again, everything hasn't been fleshed out. Schools haven't been added to, CSI lists or priority lists or anything like that. Only time will tell to see if there were significant consequences to districts that only tested a handful of kids compared to our district that put forth a good faith effort to test as many students as possible.
I don't think this is a question or a comment necessarily for our district in general. Since I've been on the board and we've had a few of these conversations, I just wonder how you make it more public knowledge for any parent in Michigan to understand what that grade really is. Because it's just disappointing to me. I don't think many people understand what goes into that grade, and they just take it as that school's good, that school's bad. It's disappointing.
We actually, an academic team, dug into those data. We're like, okay, if this district wasn't requiring it, what do their grades look like? What do their proficiency? And there were examples, my colleagues will share this, where there were only a few students and the proficiency rates were wonderful. And so, it's always smart for us in meetings like this or in full board meetings to share what grades really mean and to tell our story, because if we do not tell our story, someone else is going to tell our story for us.
Yep.
So,
And I will just give a shout out to the teachers that my own kids have had in the district do a wonderful job during conferences of explaining what our tests mean and really putting your mind at ease as a parent. And because of the conversations I've had with teachers, I'm able to have conversations with friends and relatives that will call and say, should I be worried my son did bad on this? And have those conversations, because I really don't think the knowledge is out there for most parents.
Absolutely. Again, we know that in the high school level, a student's transcript is far more important than a test score. That said, the test scores need to be better. Absolutely 100%. And so we'll be working at this, probably a good transition to show some of the things that we are doing moving forward to address the areas on which we're struggling. We had, of course, a 2-week winter break extended learning. I'll get into that a little bit when we go into the next section. There are many Tier 2 interventions out there that are essentially individualized support for students in the Grand Rapids Public Schools. So when we talk about Tier 2 interventions, these aren't whole group interventions. These are individualized supports where students are provided diagnostic assessments to find out where they are, and then strategies that are put in place to address those areas on which students are struggling. The next bullet is something that you all should be proud of, because our Board of Education has approved expenditures throughout the years so that we finally have robust curricula. There was a time where we did not have the science resources that we needed, social studies resources that we needed. Now we have what we need. Keeping in mind, the first year when you get a new curriculum, the scores don't jump up the next year, but over a period of time they will, because you have a curriculum that is viable, coherent, standards aligned. What's tested at the state level is being addressed every single day in our classrooms. So that is something that you all should be very proud of. After school tutoring is in place. The GREA and the administration negotiated a higher rate for students who are willing, or for teachers rather, who are willing to support scholars after school. We are going to continue with summer programming this year. professional learning that is, of course, aligned to curriculum and instruction, equity initiatives, etc., and then extracurricular activities that are aligned to core. The last thing we want to do is have this 100% remediation program for our scholars. So if I'm struggling in math throughout the school day, then after school I'm getting more math. Can we find creative ways as a school district to teach mathematical concepts in a fun way, so to speak? So you're really doubling down on robotics. When we think of other content areas, we're lining up close-up trips right now to DC so we can learn about government and actually being in Washington, DC. So we're opening that up to high school students and middle school students for the first time. We've done high school before, but not middle school. So those are being planned. Mr. Lewis and his team working on a large HBCU tour this year. Again, in previous years, we partnered with other districts. A couple of years ago, we started doing our own thing. So ensuring that we have a wonderful HBCU tour this year. And then school-driven experiences, giving the administrators the autonomy at the building level to come up with their own ideas, whether that's chess club, spelling bee, etc., in their own school. So giving them some autonomy because they know their student population better than anyone. So again, we've got lots of interventions in place. I'm hopeful that we get close to 100% participation in the spring, and then we'll bring you back hopefully some better results after that. Let's hope let's hope school can stay in session. And now this is my transition to Intersession Winter 2021. So again, the first time we've ever done this, 6 days of instruction over the holiday break. We identified students at the 40th percentile or below on our MAP assessment. That's measures of academic progress. Probably heard us reference MAP tests. We invited our families. We gave access to principals and parents to enroll students. We had 14 certified teachers apply for Intersession. We were able to hire 12 of them. We needed elementary credentials for most of the positions. We were able to do that. We hired one administrator from all of the 4 quadrants of the city to help our scholars. So Victoria Simon over at Aberdeen, Thomas Standifer at Mulek, Tim Mabin, and Mike Perez. So those were the 4 administrators. Of course, Tim at Shawmut and Mike from Burton. And then PD was provided to all teachers before they started teaching scholars over the holidays. Those are the days we had instruction, 12:20 to 12:22, and then 12:27 to 12:29. We went from 9 o'clock until noon. We gave our teachers half an hour of prep every single day. There were 312 scholars who participated K through 12. Half of the scholars were from the elementary division, and then the other half were from the secondary division, and those were students who focused on credit recovery, so getting caught up on some of those classes in which they were behind. As an incentive, what we did is students who attended the majority of the time. We know some things come up, especially over the holidays where students can't participate. Had a kind of a movie packet for not only students but their families, and then also extended that to the teachers who were teaching in the program. We thought that would be a nice touch. Here is the Intersession Winter schedule. So you'll see that the homeroom teachers started out with the entire group to start the day for about 15 minutes. Hey team, this is what we're going to do today. Since this was individualized on iExcel, there was lots of differentiation, lots of individualized student support. So that's essentially what a teacher's day looked like. So they would check in with group 1, focus on some projects, and then move on to the next group. And you can see the student sample schedule next to that. And then I would like Amy to come up at this time. She's going to briefly talk to you about what iExcel is and why we think it's a tremendous resource for our scholars. Amy?
Yeah, thank you. So it's a personalized learning platform, digital platform, and it does have comprehensive K-12 curriculum for both mathematics and ELA. We also have access to science and social studies for grades 2 through 8, but for the purpose of the winter intersession, we focused on math and ELA. And we have this program across the district and available to every school. And so for this particular time, it offers all of the skills. It offers skills aligned to all of our standards, and teachers can then individually assign. It's a great, one of the wonderful things about it is it's a really friendly, user-friendly, intuitive platform that's easy for teachers and easy for students. So that's a real plus when you're training somebody to do something new. And they could go in, we showed them in the professional learning how they could not only assign the different topics or standards-based skills to their students, but how they could create individual groups so that it's targeted to what students need. Not every student needs the same assignment. And so they could easily make sort of mini classes or mini groups within there to assign things to. In the training, we also helped, one thing that's really nice is when you look up ways to search topics in this platform, you can search by a topic's content name, you can search by state standard, or it is aligned to our actual curriculum materials. So they can go in and under math, they can find our Go Math materials, and it aligns the skills to each of the chapters in Go Math or to each of the units in My Perspectives or ReadyGen that they're using for ELA. So in our training, we offered them suggestions on what topics and things by grade level students might want to be working on, because these were things that had been covered in the first semester of school, hoping that that way we're trying to suggest that we keep students as much at grade level as possible, having them work and solidify their knowledge in those concepts. We gave them those suggestions of things that they could assign to students, but we also made sure that we made suggestions for the student who might just be struggling so much they're not seeing any success, that here are some skills, prerequisite skills they may want to work on. And on the flip side, if the student is doing so well with these suggestions, then here are some ideas for what you might want to do to extend them. So they received that in the training. They also received training on how to use what's called the live feed, so that when they weren't working with a group of students on a Zoom call with this program or with other resources that they might have pulled in for those skills, they could see in live time what the students were doing. And so they could immediately see if a student was struggling a lot, that they could then reach out and contact that student. So they had a live feed. We also showed them how to do what's called a jam session. And in the jam session, you can invite different students. So at that time, they could do a jam session if they saw students struggling, or if they just saw in general there was an area some students needed help with, where they could invite the student into the session with them, so the student on their computer could see the same skill items, practice items by the skill. And within those items, it has supports, right? It shows you examples or short videos or different things to support you if you're struggling with it. So a teacher could do sort of a mini lesson on the spot with a jam session where all students could see it. Students then are able to input what they think the answer is after they get the support, and the teacher gets real-time feedback of which students were successful with that item and who wasn't, so that they know whether or not they need to back things up. And then it gives them the option: do you want an easier skill next, a harder skill? Do you want to use the same? Do you want to stay at the same level with this skill? So they could really give them that targeted, individualized help right in real time. Since we were talking about a short amount of time, right, each day that they were working with students, we wanted to be able to make it individualized and targeted and easy to use as much as possible.
So this live feed and jam session are part of this.
It's part of the
iExcel
program. Yep,
Okay.
it's part of what comes in the program. Yeah, and then there are wonderful analytic reports that they can get on how their students were doing. So they could also share with parents individual student reports of how the students were progressing, and we showed them those things as well if they weren't already familiar with them.
So is this a program that we see using in the future as far as like summer school or?
Yeah, we use it during the school day. That's why it was such a nice transition. This
Oh,
wasn't a
yeah.
one-off for Intersession. This is being used in our schools every single day.
Okay.
So when the students were assigned, they were already familiar with the platform, and they had data that were already a part of iExcel. So that was a huge plus for us when we decided to essentially adopt this for winter programming.
Okay.
With this program, does a student have the capability as they're mastering a skill for it to automatically give them assignments to build on that? Or
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. When a student goes into the platform, it already has some recommendations listed there just based on what grade level they're assigned to. But then they also have what's called a real-time diagnostic that they can constantly go in. And if a teacher's using this in the classroom, they encourage them to kind of go in and work on that a little bit every week or two to keep it updated so that they can see they can go in and get suggestions in different topic areas based on how they're doing in that, or teachers can put in the recommendations of what they should do based on what that diagnostic is doing. But yeah, in fact, when we looked at some reports from our winter intersession, I noticed several students who were not only doing things that were assigned by teachers, I could see which things were assigned by teachers, but also students that were just choosing to do additional skills and topics during the intersession time. They were working beyond that time. So they can really drive their own learning, but then there's the piece where the teacher can come in and help to drive where they see what the student needs as well.
overall, do the students seem to really engage with this particular program and seem to enjoy it? I know they are a very digital group in general, so I'm just wondering, is this something they seem to take to and really engage with?
I think at this point, are we hopefully looking to get, I think we're so soon after having this happen that we haven't had a chance to, we'd like to survey the teachers and the students that participated. So, yeah, you can speak to that.
Next steps, analyze data of students who participated
Yeah.
Versus their peers who did not participate. Feedback sessions with Intersession teachers and principals. That is set up for tomorrow. So we're hearing tomorrow how the teachers experienced this, how the principals experienced this. Survey our parents and students who participated. And then, do we continue with Intersession? How do we apply what we've learned to after-school tutoring? So we had a lot of learning this year. In a couple of schools, what we found is we had enough supports from an instructional perspective. Well, what about social emotional support? What about students who may need counseling services, during the holidays? So as we think about what this may look like over spring break, if we decide to do it then, or back in winter intersession, so to speak, those are things that we really have to consider. But we really wanted to do, we think it went pretty well, but we want to hear from, our end users. So that's what we're going to do. Anything else, Amy?
That's for me.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a lot of information to share with you in about an hour. We hope it wasn't too much. We hope it was just right. And if there are, again, next steps or future topics, please share them with Ms. Davis, and Ms. Davis and I will discuss them. Anything you need, we will absolutely bring it to you. And then if we have some ideas, if we think that, gosh, you should be hearing this information from us at this time, we will share that as well. So, Ms. Davis, maybe it's a couple of things that you request and then a couple of things that the administration brings to your attention on which we're focusing.
Kim is joining me again on the committee, and then we have Dr. Baker and Reverend Matthias moving forward. So
This is my last committee meeting. I will miss
Thank
you
you
guys,
for
but
being a
thank
part
you,
of it.
So much for keeping us updated and for all the hard work. It definitely shows, so thank you.
Well, thank you for asking really good questions every time too, Ms. Grant. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
thank you so
Thank you.
much.
You guys
Meeting
have a
adjourned.
great evening.
You too. Thank you.